This Choircast podcast is brought to you by How to Not Suck as a Christian. This book is a witty, no BS guide to unlearning the toxic parts of Christianity, like purity culture, apologetics, and the idea that God's love is limited to straight conservative Americans. It's sharp, it's irreverent, and it'll definitely make your fundamentalist aunt clutch her pearls. You can get the audiobook on Audible. Print and ebooks of How to Not Suck as a Christian are available to ship to your aunt wherever books are sold.
Western Christianity has spent the last 2,000 years telling everyone they're separated from God.
This is Not Church with John and Nat Turney and Bethany Shea.
Well, hi, friends. Welcome back to the podcast. This is Not Church. We are so glad that you're here with us today. As always, we have a wonderful guest with us. Nat will not be joining us today. He had something else going on, so we will miss his voice and his enthusiasm. But hopefully John and I can carry it without him.
Yeah.
But I am here with John. You want to say hi, John?
Hi, John.
There you go. Okay, good. Yeah. Love the consistency.
Yeah.
And I'm Bethany, and I just want to say thanks for being here. We are here with Brian McLaren, which is the best ever. I just cannot get enough of Brian's work. Brian is a best-selling author, internationally acclaimed speaker, and outspoken advocate for a new kind of Christianity. He is named one of Time Magazine's 25 most influential evangelical Christians. Brian McLaren was a pastor for over 20 years. He is a frequent guest on radio and television programs and an in-demand blogger on faith and public policy. And he has a new book that has come out called The Last Voyage. It is different than his other books in some ways because it is a work of fiction. It is a novel. But we wanted to talk about your book and we wanted to just welcome you to the podcast. So welcome, Brian.
Thank you for having me. Great to be with you both.
Yeah, definitely. So fun to have you here. I feel like the last time we had you here was you had the book called Life After Doom. And that was an excellent book as well. Obviously, it was kind of is a wake-up call to living more sustainably and what it means to be people of faith living in a world that is in an ecological crisis in many ways. And it feels like in some ways, maybe that book influenced the writings of your newest novel. Is that true?
Well, sort of. They gestated together. I actually began writing this book in November of 2016. Now, if you can guess why that might be a significant date.
Yeah.
Literally the day after the election, I thought, okay, our country has elected a billionaire and they want him to run the company like a business. And I thought, this is not going to end well. And I thought, I need some way to cope with this. And so I started writing The Last Voyage the day after that election. And so it's been gestating for a long time. So in some ways, I was grappling with these things in that book before I wrote Life After Doom. Yeah.
Wow.
But they grew up together, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
Did you feel like it was kind of like a therapeutic process?
Exactly.
Yeah,
yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Here's what it felt like. I hope it's more than this, but when you feel anxiety, sometimes what you have to do is ease yourself into facing what's the worst thing that could happen. and in a way, if you can ease yourself into that and face that and look at different possible scenarios, it helps you face actual reality. You're not always cringing because you've at least gone there mentally. And I think in some ways that's what I was trying to do. Let's imagine where things go if oligarchs rule the world. And then when I started writing the book Life After Doom, obviously I was focused much more on kind of in a nonfiction way, I was trying to help people cope. It was more of a book to try to help people understand what's going on and cope. But this book was good for me, and I hope it'll be good for readers as a way of imagining, how will people live if this happens? How will people live if that happens?
Yeah. Yeah. I think like visualizing the worst case scenario is sometimes it's like what I have to do all the time as parenting, like parenting my kids as teenagers, like what is the worst that could happen? And not to where I'm like future tripping in some sort of a doom reality, but just like I think Rob Bell, he did a podcast once and he was mentioning how sometimes we have to envision the worst thing. And then he used the word maybe. Like, could this happen? Maybe. Maybe I'll fail. Maybe things won't go right. And I felt like that was hopeful, that word maybe. But what you brought in this book was just like,
yes,
it was incredible. Yeah. Yeah. That sense of like, maybe this could be, but it did feel very therapeutic. So just the way that you wrote it felt like that for me, for sure.
Oh, good. That's good to hear.
Before we started recording, I said that it kind of reminds me of like a prophetic fiction, prophetic science fiction. And for me, it's like, yeah, it's like a what if scenario, right?
Mm-hmm.
What if this happens? Could this happen? It kind of reminds me of like someone like Octavia Butler and the parable of the sower.
Well, that makes me feel great to just be brought up in the same sentence with her, because I revere her and her work. So, yeah. Octavia Butler was imagining a very similar future, and I guess, did she write that in 1990 or 1980s? I forget when.
I'd have to look it up, but I mean, it's definitely
Mm-hmm.
I mean, her prescience. I mean, I just think she had the right intuitions about how certain things unfold, but also her feeling that, well, in the future, she imagined people needed some kind of spiritual framework. They needed something that would help them not only survive, but have a vision for a better future than the one that just slipped through their fingers.
And you bring the same thing up in your book as needing some kind of spiritual guidance, some kind of spiritual awareness. How important was that to be part of the process?
Mm-hmm. Well, one of the dramas in the book, as folks who will read it will find out, there two of the main characters. This book doesn't have a single main character. It really is a book where a community of people are the main character. But two of the main characters are a daughter and her father, and obviously, I wanted to play with the challenges of how men have held power in recent centuries, and what an alternative kind of power it might be that women would bring in the future, especially if we decide that the way men are doing things is not turning out so well.
Right.
And then not only that, but you have an older generation and a younger generation. And Colfax, her father, in many ways is the epitome of kind of the modern Enlightenment person. Science will solve our problems. Religion is superstition and con artistry, and we just want to leave that in the past. And of course, what happens, you were speaking about teenagers, Bethany, his teenager becomes a religious person. So she has her own spiritual path that he doesn't understand or approve of. And so this is one of the big tensions, especially in The Last Voyage.
And this is a potential trilogy, is that correct?
That's right. The second book is called The Great Rift, and The Last Voyage starts with recruitment for the last voyage of people going to Mars, and ends partway through the voyage. And the second book, The Great Rift, picks up during the voyage and then takes you into the first 9 months or so of their time on Mars. And then the third, which I'm in the process of writing now, skips ahead 30 years, and it's called Ethnogenesis. So then we're dealing with the first and second generation of people born on Mars, and what will happen in that novel is that they restore contact with a group of people on the Earth, and so that will be about some of the dynamics of these two communities and what they're dealing with.
Nice.
When you were thinking, go ahead, John.
No, I was just going to say that I can't wait for the next two.
I know.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you.
Like when you were thinking of writing this novel, writing fiction in this way, did you have all three books in mind? Were you thinking it was just be one long story, or how did that even come about for you?
Yeah. So it began, I was only planning to write one.
Okay.
But as the story developed, I thought, gosh, I feel I'm having to cut things short that I really are part of what I really want to explore. So I said, well, what if I turned it into 2? But as soon as I thought of turning it into 2, I thought, oh, wouldn't it be fun? Because I had an idea of closure for the second novel.
Yeah.
But then I thought, wouldn't it be fun to jump ahead 30 years? So that's, I went from 1 to 3 one afternoon.
Is there a big difference for you going from nonfiction to fiction writing? Has that been a learning curve? And I know you've done some like kind of fiction in the beginning, of your career, but yeah.
So, Bethany, my first career was as a college English teacher. So literature has always been a big deal for me, and I've always loved reading. I love fiction, and I have a special love for science fiction. But yeah, the writing process is very different. And in many ways, this has felt like play, and this has felt like self-therapy, and this has felt a lot less like work. I love to write, but just in general. But this has been a different kind of writing that's been refreshing for me.
Do you have people that you get to process these ideas with and kind of flesh some of the ideas out before you start writing them? Or how does that whole process work?
Yeah, I'm kind of private in the writing phase. Once I have a draft that I'm happy with, I like to give it to some people and get their feedback. So my wife, her name is Grace. Grace is not a novel reader. She is an avid reader, but she loves to read science books. Like literally, she loves to read books on quantum physics. It's one of her favorite subjects. So, but she doesn't like fiction. And when I gave this to her, she read it in 2 sittings, and that made me feel really, really good. She said it was the first novel she ever read that she couldn't put down. And I'm sure people are thinking, well, she's biased. She is my toughest critic. So that made me feel really good. I have a friend, an Episcopal priest who I met in my travels and found out that he loved science fiction. And so he said, hey, I'd love to read it when you have a draft done. So I sent it to him, and then he emailed me and said, I have a 14-year-old son who doesn't normally read fiction, but he asked me about it. Could I give it to him? So he gave the manuscript to his 14-year-old son. His 14-year-old son wrote me, 7-page single-spaced letter, talking to me about how the book affected him and talking to me about the characters. And I wrote back to him, I said, I have never had an editor, a professional editor, take anything I've written so seriously. So that made me really happy when a 14-year-old liked it.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I mean, they're very honest. 14-year-olds are kind of like the most brutally honest people we'll ever meet. So you can definitely take that with, that he was, wow, he must have really been impacted by it.
Awesome. He's also very smart and very, but he really, he did me a huge favor in reading it and giving me such honest feedback, and made a couple suggestions that made it into the book too.
Oh, wow.
I was curious how the writing process, how researching all of this, how has that impacted your own faith, your own experiences of God and what it means to be human?
Yeah. Well, one of the things about fiction that I love is when you start to develop a character, and, every character has some overlap with yourself, right? You have to have something in yourself to start with. Even the most horrible villain in any book, all of us have certain parts of ourselves where we've been hateful, and we get in touch with that in some way. But what I think has been especially enjoyable for me, and I think challenging, but only in a positive way, not like, oh, this is hard work, it is to let characters develop and let yourself like the character, and let the character have a backstory and motivations and desires. And every once in a while to have the character surprise you a little bit. And I think one of the ways that affects me spiritually is that the act of developing empathy and trying to imagine how things look to another person. There are a lot of people who get pretty far in life without developing that quality. In fact, we've got people today who think that empathy is a bad thing.
Right.
But the development of that, I think that's one of the reasons I've always loved literature. It helps me enter into somebody else's experience. Years ago, I read the book by the Jewish writer Chaim Potok called My Name is Asher Lev. And it's about a boy who grows up in an ultra-Orthodox Jewish family. And he happens to have great artistic talent. He's like an artistic prodigy. But here he's in this very strict religious sect that believes the visual arts are breaking the commandment about making graven images. Not only that, but part of his art training is to paint nudes. And of course, that's just seen as nothing but sin, to his parents and religious community. And I just remember when I read that book, I thought, I'm actually feeling what it would be like. I'm entering into someone's experience in a very different world. And one thing is, it was a very different world. The other thing is, I grew up in a strict religious family too. And there's areas of connection and empathy that develop.
I was thinking, John, about your book that you wrote and how, the sense of like finding your own self in the characters and in your own character development. I'm curious, John, did you have any impact of like a faith or spirituality perspective or shift through writing your own book?
Yeah, I mean, I talk about this sometimes with friends who have read the book. And one of the things that I found myself is I wrote a book that I actually disagree with myself sometimes now. I disagree with some of the process or the faith that I came out with. So it's like I would like to go back and rewrite it a little bit, but I can't. It's out there in the world. But with your book, like with Colfax, I definitely related with him a lot. I feel like he's a character that I can relate to as someone who questions a lot of things.
Yes.
Is that
Yes.
from you? Is there a part of you in Colfax?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, Colfax, he really can be an annoying character in some ways. And he has some super big blind spots, but he also has something that he is holding on to that he knows is good. And he knows that critical thinking is good. And he knows that there's an awful lot of BS out there and you can't let your critical thinking down for a second or you'll get sucked into something that could be really, really bad. He also is very aware of power. Even though he's not aware of his own power, kind of in a self-aware way, he is, his ego is very sensitive to slights and that sort of a thing. And in some ways that's his downfall, but in other ways it's what humbles him because he has to see that in himself,
Yeah. There are times where I feel like I see like where I'm nodding, yes, he's getting it. And then he'll turn around and not get it. And you're like, okay, I think we're going to be okay. I think things are going to move forward better. And then he opens up his mouth and says something else. And you're like, oh, okay. He still has that blind spot. He still can get really angry. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the fun parts, for me writing the book was he and Eve have some rip-roaring arguments and, getting to play out an argument. I just had an experience recently. You know how AI is doing all these new things. I was in a meeting recently with an organization and there was some real tension in the meeting and all of the meeting was recorded. And so we instantly got a transcript of the whole meeting. And then we got an AI summary of the meeting. And there was a lot of arguing, not a bad kind of arguing, sort of the kind of arguing that needs to happen in it. But I just remember as I read it thinking, oh man, there's a lot of people I hope never see this transcript.
That's so funny. I was curious about the names. I mean, it seems like, you have Thurman named after Howard Thurman. I'm wondering about Eve with being like the first woman. Was there meaning behind the names that you chose for characters?
Yeah, there was. And obviously when someone's named Eve, it's going to be very, very evocative. Of course, this Eve has a fertility problem, as we find out in the book. So a little twist on that set of assumptions. And of course, many of the other characters are from different countries. So their name is sort of is unfamiliar to English readers. So that will sort of reinforce, if you were to start a new community on Mars. You could either do it as a project of a nation where you want everybody to be from the same nation, or you could do it as a project of the human species. If that's the case, you want as much diversity as you can get. And so that's one of the other sort of dramas of the book. And one of the challenges that I'm thinking about our own future here on Earth. We're trying to figure out how we can have diverse people who stop thinking of themselves as normal and other people as weird, but instead think, hey, we're all weird. we're all normal to ourselves. So,
right. Yeah. Well, I find it interesting that, right now we're dealing with Trump and his dismantling of DEI. Was it important to you to show that kind of diversity within the crew of this last voyage?
While some people are trying to tear down diversity, others of us understand that this is the work of our future, to build a world where we learn to accept and love and be together. It's so ironic for me that people with a Christian background get upset about this. I just was reading in Galatians the other day where Paul says, in Christ, there is no Jew or Greek, slave or free, male or female. He takes all of the hot button divisions in society and all of the hot button domination relationships. And he says those things don't matter at all. And Paul gets a bad reputation from so many, in so many ways, but gosh, on that theme, he is like a dog on a bone. The future he envisions is a future where different people are brought together and are made one, not where people keep wanting to slip back into one form or another of apartheid,
Were you raised with that way of thinking, like the seeking of diversity, trying to create spaces where you were around other people that didn't look or think or act or vote like you? And if so, then how has that impacted you? And if you weren't raised like that, how has that impacted you?
Yeah. So that opens up a whole bunch of different stories, Bethany. Of course, I was born in 1956, which is the year of the Montgomery bus boycott. And so I was born in the civil rights era. And that was a theme to my entire childhood and coming of age years. My paternal grandfather was a missionary in Africa. And the weekend that Dr. King was murdered, we were visiting my grandfather, and he said, "I'm glad they shot that communist devil." And
wow,
I was 12 years old, and I was taught to respect my elders, but I must have said something to my grandfather. I don't remember what I said. I probably just blurted out something. And then he gave me a stern lecture on white supremacy, justified by the Bible, something I'd never heard of. He talked about the curse of ham, which I thought was a curse of pork products, but it turns out this was a trope of his generation that defended white supremacy. Later, I realized he was a missionary in Central Africa, Central Southern Africa, Angola, but he did all of his, when he would get some time off, he would go to South Africa. So he was in South Africa, and that's what they said about Mandela and Tutu. They said they were communists. So to be a segregationist was to be, a good person, and to be anything else was a communist. So one day I said to my parents were the opposite. My parents in the 1960s, we had people of every race and religion at our dinner table. Like, I thought that was normal, but now I realize my parents were so unusual. I remember we had some foreign students come to our house for dinner multiple times. And one of them was from Laos and was a committed communist. And I remember us talking about communism and socialism around the dinner table, things that, I just thought this is how life is. But you realize not many people would have done that. And years later, I asked my dad, how did you become so open? Your dad was so different. And there was a religious dimension to it. For my grandfather, everybody had to be converted to the same religion. And I said, Dad, where did you change? How did you become different? And he said, it wasn't the church. He said, it was the army. He said, I had been taught that everybody, that there's some hierarchy and all this sort of thing. He said, but when I was in the army, we all slept in the same room and we all worked together and our lives depended on each other. And I realized we were all the same. So I was so blessed to have that in my parents.
That's incredible. Wow.
It kind of comes back to like this idea of community, right? Where when you build a community and you learn to get to know other people who don't fit within your culture or your religion or your political stance, it gives you a chance to understand them better than it would be if you stand outside of it and kind of throw daggers at it and say they're different than me, so I don't want anything to do with them.
Yes. And I think that's another thing that novels and movies, long form fiction can do for people. It helps humanize the other. You see someone who's different, but you, in a certain sense, unless you shut the book and throw it away or walk out of the movie, you're going to have to stay with that person a little bit longer to maybe see more of them than you would have normally.
How do you cultivate diverse relationships in your own life now for yourself and in your family?
Yeah, it's as you say that, Bethany. I remember when I was a pastor, I thought one day, I don't have any friends who are not Christian. And then I thought, and I don't have, like I used to, when I taught at a university, I had friends, I had almost no Christian friends in all of my professional relationships. But in the church, I'd become very much segregated only around Christians, right? And then I thought, and you know what? Almost all of my friends are white. Like I have a lot of people of color who are acquaintances, but in terms of a really close friend. And I remember I prayed. I just said, I need some more friends. I need more relationships. And maybe because I prayed that, I sort of kept my eyes open. And a couple of weeks later, I had to go to an event. There was a father-son pancake breakfast at my son's elementary school. So I went to that, and one of my son's best friends was African American, and his dad was there, and we sat at the same table. And I just knew when I met this guy, I just knew we're going to be friends. And a wonderful, deep friendship developed that brought a huge amount of blessings in my life. And it was interesting. After we'd gotten to know each other for a while, he said to me, Brian, you're my first white friend in my whole life. And I realized, yeah, we still have all of these barriers, So that work is important.
I love that you said that you prayed for it. And I think, sometimes we think of prayer as like God's this magical genie or something that's going to grant our wish. But when we pray for a certain way to see the world or see ourselves, it's like our hearts are aligned with the direction we want them to go. And it's not necessarily God saying, well, here's your black friend. It's more like my eyes are now open to see what has already existed around me that I just missed because of my own privilege. And
oh my goodness.
Yeah.
As you say that, because I grew up in a very fundamentalist setting, I memorized a lot of Bible verses. And one of the Bible verses I memorized was in Philippians, and it says, don't be anxious about anything, but in everything, let your requests be made known to God. But as you were saying that, I was thinking, yeah, but you're also letting your requests be made known to yourself.
Right.
Because underneath anxiety is almost always a desire. And it's a desire that's in danger of being frustrated. And one of the things that prayer is just good for mental health is that we're making our desires explicit, and that has all kinds of good benefits.
I love that passage. I've actually been sitting in that a lot this last few weeks because, he starts with saying, rejoice in the Lord. So there's a sense of kind of get your heart to that place of experiencing joy or seeing joy. It's it's an intention, it's an intentionality. And then don't be anxious. And then he says, and then think about the things that are good and things that are worthy and pleasing. And then it's almost like in the middle of rejoicing and thinking about the good, the anxiety doesn't exist as rapidly. It doesn't mean that it doesn't. And, obviously this is a non-clinical sort of anxiety. There's a type of anxiety that we need help and medication for and everything. But there is a kind of anxiety or worry that is very obsessive and where our brains just like latch on and cannot see anything else but the current worry. I feel that a lot. And when I am really purposeful about having this sense of rejoicing and thinking about the good, not trying to ignore the suffering or anything, not trying to like Pollyanna my way through, but like actually like focusing my mind on something different, then I'm able to see more clearly, I guess.
Yes.
Yeah.
There's just an awful lot of good mental health insight in that chapter.
Yeah.
So I want to talk more about the book, but I don't want to give away a lot of the book, right? But there's this dark undertone,
yes,
of something that's happening. And again, I want people to read the book. I don't want to give away too much.
Yeah.
But I don't even know how to phrase the question without giving away too much about the book. But was it hard to write about these dark undertones?
Yeah. So it would. I knew I was taking a risk in going to that kind of dark place, John. But I hope something that people realize is this terrible thing that's happening on Mars among a small group of people is also happening on Earth among a large group of people. And I felt like in some ways, when it's happening to a large group of people, we almost don't notice it. And when it happens to a smaller group of people, we have to pay attention to it. And that's all we need to say about that here, except to say that what will happen to readers at some point as they're reading the book and they start feeling about this huge problem that's emerged on Mars is that they'll start to say, hold it, is this a mirror image of Earth too?
Another part of the book that I find very interesting is just this idea of keeping secrets.
Yes.
And there's a lot of secrets.
Yes.
And I guess the question there is this again just a model for us to look at in a smaller context to a larger context of what's going on here within our country, within the world?
That issue of secrets kept coming up for me in the book, and I didn't really know why. I just felt like it was the right thing to have this be an issue. And I'm still not totally sure why, except that I think this is one of the things that's really tearing us apart here on Earth, is this feeling that there are people with so much money and so much power that they can keep secrets about what's going on. They can hide their real agendas. And what this does is it ends up sowing distrust among us about everything. And the need that we feel to be among people who, well, let me put it this way, that we have enough trust that if they needed to keep a secret, we would trust them to have a good reason for it. But until we build that amount of trust, secrets are this way that we stay. I suppose it's like an escape plan. I can cut you off at some point. And I think one of the things that I think we're trying to come to terms with here on Earth is that, well, let me say it in very stark, like political terms. Right now, I think the leaders of the nation of Israel think that they can get rid of the Palestinians. They're acting like they think they can get rid of them and get away with it. And if we're appalled by that, we should realize that in the United States, they're doing what they're doing because they watched the United States do it.
Yeah.
With Native Americans and then by enslaving people. White people in America thought they could get away with it and get away with genocide. And of course, Germany had a regime that thought they could get away with genocide. If we decide we don't want to get away with genocide, because what would that mean? What would that make us? Then we have to say, we are stuck with each other.
Yeah.
And we can't throw away people, and we have to build trust with people.
Well, and I found it, as I was looking into history, found it interesting that Hitler actually looked at the United States and the way we treated Black people, and that was his litmus test for what he was doing with the Jews in Germany.
It worked for the Americans. It'll work for us. Yeah.
Right.
And this is the tragedy about our nation, never really having a moral accounting with our own past. If we would have a moral accounting with our past, it could set an example for the rest of the world.
Well, there's this idea that we will never act like that like them then. And so we don't need to take a moral accounting of it. We can just forget about the past because we would never go into that place again. And, you see what Trump is doing with taking out important historical atrocities content from the Smithsonian, almost as a way of like saying that doesn't matter. We don't need that anymore. It's the place that we are at right now as a country. It's not new. It's not like this is the worst it's ever been, or even like compared to the Roman times. But the thing that we are invited into is to change it moving forward. And if we cannot see the atrocities of the past, we will only, we say it all the time, it'll just repeat itself. And we're seeing that. And I haven't gotten to that part where John was saying in your book about the darkness, whatever that is, that sinister undertone that's happening there. But I can imagine it has a lot to do, at least if I was to write a book, I would say it has a lot to do with the sins that we have on earth continue forth wherever we end up. Because if we aren't taking care of, if we aren't acknowledging and seeing the truth of our darkness wherever we are right now, we're going to bring it into every relationship and experience in the future as well.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And there's a way that unfolds in The Last Voyage, and then another level of it opens up in the Great Rift, the second book. We have the same instinct there, Bethany.
I'm so excited. I'm not as far into the book as John got, but I seriously have not been able to put it down today. And my son needed me to take him somewhere. And I was like, I can't. I've got to read this book. It's so good. So I did put it down. I did take care of my kid, but it's incredible, truly. I know that a lot of your writing, when you write different things, it comes from your own struggles or your own sense of trying to make sense of your own faith or your own, what you're seeing in the world. And I'm curious, is there a current struggle that you are working through right now, whether through faith or relationship, or is it just this, whatever's happening in the United States?
Well, obviously that's a huge struggle. And it's not just the United States, but just this, it feels to me like our species is at this inflection point. And, we're not getting it right. But it's just a question of how much more pain we want to cause ourselves, until we reach the point where we see what we've got to see and face what we've got to face. So that is certainly, that's part of the drama I think all of us are waking up in every day. I really wasn't thinking about this back in 2016, but, in the first pages, in the second chapter of the book, Colfax is struggling with his age. And that's certainly something. I turn 70 next year, and, facing the realities of aging and all the rest, that's certainly part of this season of my life. And it's not a bad struggle. It's like, okay, yeah, this is happening. How did that happen so fast?
Yeah, it's an interesting question that Colfax asks, because he's asked to go on this mission, but almost as like a caveat, right? And again, don't want to give away too much of the book, but I find it interesting that age comes up, the viability of bringing on someone on the mission who's older, and if that's the right choice or if that's the right option. But it's an interesting hook with his daughter.
Yes.
And how that works.
Yes.
Again, without giving away too much.
And Colfax, I think at the beginning of the book is an aging man who's still trying to hang on to his youth, and as time goes on, he's going to have to come to terms with his mortality. This is a bit of a tangent, but it connects. In the in the Hebrew scriptures, there's the book of Ecclesiastes that English Bibles translate this phrase at the beginning that comes up several times in the book: vanity of vanities, all is vanity. But the word in Hebrew is breath, all is breath. And why English interpreters decided that breath means vanity, I think a much better translation would be fleeting. Every breath comes and goes. Fleeting. Everything is fleeting. And this will be another theme that gets touched on in the first book, but really becomes a big deal in the second book, is the value of accepting the fleetingness of life, and how there's a time for everything, and there's a time to be born, and there's a time to die, and that's not a bad thing. And part of Colfax's fury with religion, especially Christianity and Islam, is that he feels they're just obsessed with the afterlife, and that makes them, in some ways, not care enough about this earth and this life.
That sounds super familiar. Like that's real life.
Yeah, that's right. He knows what he's talking about.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Nice.
Well, another part of the book that I find interesting is, I think there's an underlying level of pride to Colfax, but in two different ways for me. He has a pride of who he is and what he has accomplished. He also has this level of being proud of his daughter, but doesn't know how to explain it.
Yes.
Because she's holding on to her values, which I think he finds something to be proud of, but they're values that he doesn't agree with.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm so glad you felt that way. And it really ties back. Maybe that's the biggest difference in the book, is the difference between the father and daughter.
Yeah.
And I think you're right. He's proud of her, but he doesn't want to be proud of her.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like he's proud of her for her quest towards education, towards working really hard and doing all the things, but the subject matter of her quest is not his favorite subject matter. And that was interesting. And I feel like that's true for actually a lot of families. You were naming a typical family experience. Yeah, that a lot of people go through, especially right now with the political landscape that we're in, even within families that are from the same faith perspective, their interpretation of their faith with Christian nationalism or progressive Christianity, or those two polar opposites, are really tearing families apart.
Yes.
In a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So you really speak to that in this book, and in a lot of ways it was great.
As an example, I just had dinner with my parents. We have like a family dinner once a month, and my parents and I are on completely different points on the political spectrum. And it is how to navigate that and maintain a level of love and acceptance while you're together, and what is okay to talk about, what's not okay to talk about. And I think that's some of the arguments between Colfax and Eve, is what's okay to talk about and what's not okay to talk about.
Yes. I know if I bring up this subject, it'll be a landmine. It'll blow up. So how do I avoid it? But if we avoid it, we're not really being authentic. And I think all of us feel those tensions.
Yeah. Yeah. There's definitely things that are easier to avoid, but yeah, keep going, Brian.
Well, I was just going to say, and in the book, it's messy, and in our lives, it's messy. But again, sometimes it's just staying at the table through the mess is one of the things we have to learn how to do.
Yeah.
Of course, if you're I was just going to say, if you're in a spaceship, 20 million miles away from either planet, you don't have much choice. You
can't really drive away and leave the situation.
That's right. You can't get mad and go home.
Yeah.
Well, and you use a very good way of dealing with that as well. I think there's there are arguments on this ship, and it's how do you navigate those arguments in such close quarters, with no privacy. And I think you do a really good job of explaining how they best navigate these disagreements that they have, and without, trying to give people privacy, try to give people space, but there's really no quote unquote space to be given.
Yes. I went and read, there's a website called Goodreads, and they send out manuscripts to people so that people can read the book in advance and then write a review of it. And so I was reading some of the reviews, and some of them were very, very positive, and some of them were not so positive. And one of the ones that was negative said, the characters in this book have these long arguments. Nobody ever talks like that in real life. And I thought to myself, well, that might be our problem, right? We just slam a door and walk out at the first disagreement. It's something that I felt was important to try to do, is to carry on a sustained argument where two people really don't get each other and they hurt each other, but they try to stick with it.
Yeah. And we're talking about these two characters a lot, but there are other characters in there too who have secrets, who have arguments, who have disagreements. I personally would be one of the ones to say, I think you're making it very authentic, that these arguments would happen, especially when not given space to have quote unquote alone time. These arguments would surface, they would bubble up. There's no way around it.
In the literature of, in the work that people have done to try to figure out, could a group of people survive on Mars? There have been several experiments. There was something called the biosphere experiment. And the biggest problem is people just hating each other after they're in close quarters for a certain period of time. And you know what? This is one of our problems in families and in nations and in neighborhoods too. So,
yeah. I mean, it goes to this idea of, if you make your community small, you are going to have disagreements, and you're not going to be able to move out of that small community. You need to make your community larger, give yourself the space and the understanding and this ability to go and talk to other people. And that helps in the long run.
Yeah. And I think when we have that foundation of common good in mind, or what I would say is love, but that sense of like, I want human flourishing. I want the common good to be seen here. Then the disagreements, the arguments, the ways that we don't see eye to eye don't have to be the dominant narrative, but it takes so much effort in real life to get to that place of recognizing that we both, regardless of our opposite ideals, we both want the same thing for people and for life, even if we aren't getting there from the same direction.
I love that you use that phrase, common good, because that maybe is that the role of the oligarchs in the background of the novel. Common good is something that oligarchs really have no understanding of, because their entire mindset is on their own advantage, the power of their corporation, the wealth, the amount of wealth they've amassed, the class that they're in, as opposed to the lower classes that other people are in. And this is part of what we're struggling against in trying to make the common good an issue, because one of the things that oligarchs do with their money is they try to reinforce that conflict. They certainly don't invest. Well, some do. Thankfully, there are a few who do invest in the common good, but so many, till their dying breath, are still struggling for more and more dominance.
Yeah, the oligarchs are this force that's in the background of the story. Do they pop up again in the upcoming books?
It becomes a big deal in the second book.
Okay. Yeah. I wish that they would just go away quietly, but that's not how human experience works. So I'm sure that doesn't work out in your book either.
That's right.
Oh man. Wow. Well, what else have you been up to lately in your life? Like what has been something that's been bringing you joy and goodness and flourishing for you?
Sure. Well, I'll mention a couple of things. The first is I have another writing project that I'm working on. My next nonfiction book is a book called The Beautiful Logic of a Meaningful Life. And it's also moving into a different lane because, can I tell you the story behind that book?
Please.
There's
Yes.
a dear friend. Her name is Valerie Kaur. She's of the Sikh faith. And Valerie and I were part of this group called the Auburn Senior Fellows, and we became friends. And after we'd been friends for some years, she came to me at we had these retreats for this group on one of the retreats. And she said, I want to tell you something. She said, in the Sikh faith, we have this practice where sometimes we feel God or the Spirit gives us something we're supposed to tell another person. And I have a word for you. And I didn't tell her, but I said, oh yeah, I come from Pentecostal background in the US where we always have words for each other.
Yes, we do.
But she said, I think you should write a book for young people, but you should write it as a Christian, be who you are, but write it for people of all different faiths. And write a book about how to find meaning in life. So, and she said this to me maybe 12 or so years ago. And I remember I said to her, Valerie, I hope I'll be ready to write that book someday. So that's the background to this book, The Beautiful Logic of a Meaningful Life. So I'm really having a good time working on that. I'm about to take a year off. I turn 70 next year. So next year, I'm going to take a year off. And this is a little bit of immaturity on my part, but because I knew I was taking a year off next year, I just said yes to so much travel this year. So this year, I'm doing a lot of travel, maybe a little too much, but upside of it is that I've gotten to do a little add-on to a couple of my speaking engagements and had some great time. I love to fly fish, so I was fly fishing in Idaho earlier this summer and then in Alaska. So for a fly fisherman, Idaho and Alaska are about the peak of places you get to go. So whenever I'm stuck in an airport with another delayed flight, I just close my eyes and think about those streams up in Alaska or Idaho, and makes me happy.
Do you catch a lot when you're out there?
Sometimes, and sometimes no.
No.
Wow,
that's beautiful.
Yeah, I'm not a big fisherman, but I do enjoy fishing, and even a bad day on say on the lake or out in the Puget Sound, which is one of the areas I like to fish. Even a bad day fishing is better than
not fishing.
Not fishing.
That's right. That's right.
Oh, that's beautiful. Wow. And for all of the traveling that you're doing, do you have it posted somewhere so people can find where you're at and how to be a part of your things?
If they go on my website, brianmclaren.net, there's an events section. So I think they'll find that. And yeah. And then they won't see anything after about November. So, because next year, my wife Grace has put up with an awful lot of travel in my professional life. So next year we'll hang out and spend time with the kids and the grandkids, and that'll be a good thing to do.
Are you going to go fly fishing?
Oh yeah, every chance I can.
Oh yeah. Have you taught your grandkids how to fly fish?
I have one grandson, and he is a fantastic fisherman. He is great. 10 years old. He's just great. So we're fishing buddies. Yeah.
My daughter went to Montana this summer for a month, and she went fly fishing for the first time and just absolutely loved it. And she's fished a lot. We have a river near our house, and she fishes steelhead and just with a regular pole. And she said there's nothing like it. She's needed a lot of different therapy throughout her life. All of our kids are adopted, and there's a certain amount of trauma that comes from that. And so she's done a lot of equine therapy, and horses have been so grounding for her. But she said that fly fishing was a different kind of grounding, where it felt like a dance was happening that she was invited into in that moment. And it was just the most beautiful thing to hear her talk about that.
Well, I like her already. Yeah. I hope someday I'll get to be on the water with her. She sounds like a good person.
Oh, she's a spitfire. She's kind of the best. Yeah. Well, this has been so cool, Brian, to be able to talk to you about your book and about this new project moving forward, and this year that you get to have that is not just a year off, but a year of rest. And my prayer and my hope for you is a deepening of joy in your marriage and in your own soul, and a sense of release of whatever it is that you're holding on to that's really burdensome, that it's just let go of and you can really be present.
Well, thank you so much. And I want to tell you, I've just enjoyed this conversation so much. And I feel so grateful that you connected with the book, and so grateful for the conversation we've had.
Well, thank you. John, did you want to say anything else?
No, again, I just want to say thank you for taking the time to come and chat with us. This has been an amazing conversation. I can't wait for our listeners to hear this episode. They're going to really enjoy it, and just remind them to buy the book. It's an amazing book, and you definitely want to pick up this book. You're not going to be able to want to put it down. It's a really good book.
Well, thanks so much.
Thank you for listening to This Is Not Church. Be sure to rate and review the podcast on your platform of choice. If you would like to partner with us, visit patreon.com/thisisnotchurch, where you will receive exclusive content such as early access to episodes, videos of upcoming episodes, and live Q&A sessions. Be sure to check out our Facebook group or follow us on Twitter and Instagram. All the links are in the show notes. We'll be back soon with another episode.